A reading from John chapter 21, beginning at the first verse. Afterwards, Jesus appeared again to his disciples by the Sea of Galilee. It happened this way. Simon Peter, Thomas, also known as Didymus, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 other disciples were together. "I'm going out to fish," Simon Peter told them, and they said, "Oh, we'll go with you." So they went out and got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. Early in the morning, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples did not realize that it was Jesus. He called out to them, "Friends, haven't you any fish?" "No," they answered. He said, "Throw your net on the right side of the boat and you will find some." When they did, they were unable to haul the net in because of the large number of fish. Then the disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, "It is the Lord." As soon as Peter heard him say, "It is the Lord," he wrapped his outer garment around him, for he had taken it off, and jumped into the water. The other disciples followed in the boat, towing the net full of fish, for they were not far from shore, about 100 yards. When they landed, they saw a fire of burning coals there with fish on it and some bread. Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish you've just caught." So Simon Peter climbed back into the boat and dragged the net ashore. It was full of large fish, 153, but even with so many, the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, "Come and have breakfast." None of the disciples dared ask him, "Who are you?" They knew it was the Lord. Jesus came, took the bread, and gave it to them, and did the same with the fish. This was now the 3rd time Jesus appeared to his disciples after he was raised from the dead. When they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" "Yes, Lord," he said, "you know that I love you." Jesus said, "Feed my lambs." Again Jesus said, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He answered, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said, "Take care of my sheep." The 3rd time he said to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was hurt because Jesus had asked him the 3rd time. "Do you love me?" he said. "Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you." Jesus said, "Feed my sheep. Very truly I tell you, when you were younger, you dressed yourself and went where you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands and someone will dress you and lead you where you do not want to go." Jesus said this to indicate the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. Then he said to him, "Follow me."
Simon Peter said, "You know that I love you." Well, he said that to Jesus. Simple words. Simple and easy to say. This is what Peter said in answer to Jesus' question. When Jesus said to me, "Do you love me more than these?" Maybe Jesus was looking at all the fishing clobber in the boat because he was in a boat at the time. Maybe that's what Jesus meant. Do you love me, the life of following fishermen, or do you love me more than that? Or maybe Jesus meant, do you love me more than these people love me? Meaning the other disciples in the boat. How much did they love Jesus? Do you love me more than them? I think probably that's what Jesus meant, but it's difficult to be sure. You see, Peter had said to Jesus a few days before Jesus died, he said these words, Everyone else may lose their faith because of you, but I never will. Now you can find those words in Matthew chapter 26, verse 33. You see, once there was a time when Peter thought that he alone could be true. And yet Peter's courage really failed him when Jesus was arrested. Because Peter's answer to Jesus' question was very simple. You know that I love you. Jesus asked Peter if he loved him 3 times. And each time Peter replied with the words, you know that I love you. That night that Peter was betrayed, Peter crept into the garden of the high priest to see what was going to happen to Jesus, whence he'd been arrested. But somebody amongst the crowd saw Peter and said, hey, weren't you with Jesus? You, I'm sure, were one of his followers. And Peter 3 times said, I don't know him. I've never seen the man. So really 3 times Peter had denied that he knew Jesus. He had the chance to say that he loved Jesus, but he said he didn't even know him. Now Jesus is reminding him of that by asking Peter 3 times if he really loves Jesus. Jesus is trying to help Peter to wipe out the memory of that 3 times that he denied him. Because he wants Peter to say, you know that I love you. See? Jesus really brought 2 things to Peter. First, he brought him a task. And secondly, he brought him what you might call a responsibility. Because each time that Peter said to Jesus, you know that I love you, Jesus replied, tend my lambs or feed my sheep, things like that. Because Jesus wanted Peter to take care of the people who followed Jesus. The second time that Peter said, you know that I love you, Jesus replied, feed my sheep. And then the third time, Jesus said something really rather different. And that's why I said that not only did Jesus bring Peter a task, but he also brought him a responsibility. You know that love is the greatest privilege in the world, but love also brings with it a great responsibility. And this is the different words that Jesus said when Peter, for the 3rd time, said, you know that I love you. Jesus said, when you were young, Peter, you walked where you chose. But the day will come when you will stretch out your arms on a cross. They will carry you somewhere where you didn't want to go. Those words are in John chapter 21, verse 18. And years later, that came true because Peter was in Rome, and that was where he was arrested himself, and he was taken to a place to be crucified. Legend says he was crucified upside down. We don't know if that's true, because they say Peter said, I'm not worthy to be crucified for my Lord, in the same way he was crucified for me. Loving Jesus brought him a task. It also brought him a cross, a sacrifice. If we really love Jesus, he will give us a task. And a task brings responsibility. And maybe, who knows, some kind of sacrifice. If we really love Jesus, we'll be glad to accept a task and to take up the cross. Peter said, you know that I love you. I want to say this to you this morning. Do you love Jesus? We may not be clever, like St. John, the disciple, was a very clever man. We may not be like that. We may not go far, like St. Paul did, who travelled all over Asia and half of Europe. Peter's task was simply to care for Jesus' followers. And we can do that too. If we really love Jesus, we can care for other people, all sorts of people. You might not be a teacher or a preacher or a great missionary, but we can be a carer for people, following in the steps of Peter, helping people in lots of ways, and thus carry out our tasks. And that will show that we really do love Jesus. Shall we say it again? Jesus, my Lord. You know that I love you.